Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. It's a moment few could have imagined. Just over a year ago, Bashar al Assad was still in power in Syria, and Ahmad al-Sharaa, well, he was on a U.S. terror list. But today, he's leading Syria's return to the international stage, including a historic visit to the White House. At the top of his agenda with President Donald Trump was the lifting of U.S. sanctions and joining the international coalition against Daesh. For Washington, the visit marks a dramatic turn in a relationship once defined by hostility. On Monday, foreign ministers from the U.S., Turkiye, and Syria met in Washington for their first trilateral talks in over a decade, focusing on security cooperation and rebuilding the country. Syrian President al-Sharaa pushed for a full lifting of sanctions and international backing for its reconstruction, a project estimated to cost more than $200 billion. Talks also touched on a possible U.S.-backed security framework between Syria and Israel. Al-Sharaa rose to power late last year after a lightning offensive by his opposition group, which toppled the Assad regime. But can Syria's new leadership turn diplomatic breakthroughs into real progress and help stabilize the wider region? For more, joining me now from Washington, D.C. is political analyst Rich Outzen. From Toronto, Jamal Mansour, a researcher and political analyst who specializes in Syria. And from Ankara, Ömer Özkızılcık, a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council. I got a great panel today to talk about quite a historic visit. Rich, I want to begin with you. I mean, a year ago, Ahmad al-Sharaa on a U.S. terror list. Today, he's in D.C. meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, albeit through the back door of the White House, an entrance there, but a truly significant visit. A lot's changed geopolitically. How important was this visit, and what are the ramifications for the United States from a security perspective, from an economic perspective, and generally for the region?
Well, thanks for having me, and it's an honor to be on with the fellow panelists, deeply respected experts in their field. Look, this thing with Sharaa, the gradual transformation from Jolani to Sharaa, as the old saying goes, happened slowly, and then all at once. It's been a number of years, actually, that through back channels in Europe and intelligence agencies, that Sharaa was indicating that he wanted to get off the bad list, so to speak. He cut ties with al-Qaeda and ISIS. He actually was collaborating or cooperating in certain ways with the West. He made it very clear that his jihad, so to speak, was with Assad, and it was about Syria, not international. That opened the door for what's happened now. Now, many doors are opened in international policy. What is remarkable here is that President Trump had the vision to actually walk through that door. He and his envoy for Syria, our ambassador in Ankara, and regional envoy Tom Barrack, have single-handedly faced down a massive amount of opposition to this, coming from people who basically took the track that once a terrorist, always a terrorist, right? Which, of course, would condemn Syria to continued sort of disunity and instability. In Washington, as you know, Yusuf, that is a remarkable thing. So it's remarkable both in terms of statecraft and policymaking. And now it opens the door for a realignment of Syria geopolitically to something more compatible with the West. It's opening the door for American and, by the way, Turkish and other European businesses as well. Most importantly, it's opening the door for a much better life for the people of Syria. Now, none of this is assured. There's still a lot of things that need to be done. The question is one of centripetal and centrifugal forces. Can Sharaa take this, if not a blank check, certainly a long leash, we'll say? Can he take that and turn that into a good governance program and hold the diverse components of Syria together? I would like to think he can, but it's remarkable that he has a chance to do so.
Mm-hmm. Jamal, I want to flip the question around from a Syria perspective. I mean, seeing al-Sharaa at the White House, joking around with President Trump about number of wives on Fox TV, giving an interview, hooping it up a little there. I mean, how significant is this for the Syrian people? How do you evaluate this bilateral? And also, how is it covered in Syria? I mean, how is it presented from a media perspective?
Oh, thank you, Yusuf Bey, and thank you for having me with these great panelists. From a Syrian perspective, this is night and day from what the former regime used to represent. Former regime was proud in its pariah status for a while. It traded on the fact that it is the outlier in international and regional politics, saying that Syria stands firm and then everybody comes to Syria. That happened through terrorism, through being the bad boy around the neighborhood, creating problems for its neighbors, and basically trading off in security threats, real or perceived, and then gaining some strategic leverage based out of them. In contrast, Syria is now being embraced by the world in a way that has not been seen before. This is not merely a European outreach. This is going to the gates of the White House. This is the first time that a Syrian president ever, let alone this particular president, as Rich was just pointing out, rightly so, walking through the gates of the White House. This is a significant moment to Syrians all around, and it's being seen on media. Obviously, there's a lot of hyperbole. There's a lot of celebratory talk, but if you ask the man on the street, especially in areas that are inside the current government's control, people are not holding their breath. They're basically waiting for something great and significant to come out of this. The removal of the sanctions back in May by President Trump, the executive orders that sanctioned Syria, was a huge thing for people, and they were awaiting that this would signal a comeback of Syria into the international fold, which has happened. Now they're waiting for the money to start to come in, the investment input, the rebuilding to start. So Shire walking into the gates of the White House represents that for a lot of Syrians. Now, if you're on the opposition side of things, people who had been thinking that the blunders of the current regime vis-a-vis Asweda and the stalled kind of negotiations with the SDF that are going somewhere and going nowhere at the time being, these populations were looking at Sharaa and saying, oh, he's going to make a mistake. The Americans are going to give him up soon. Something's going to happen, some change in Damascus. And now I think these populations are going to see and witness that, no, Sharaa actually has been anointed by the White House as the president for the coming period, at least in Syria. And that means that they are going to have to readjust their policy to stance towards him. So there's a lot of understanding on either side of whether you like a Sharaa or not in Syria, that this is a historic transformation of the person who was once a pariah, wanted terrorist, in between brackets, on the American list, to someone who's been, as you said, horsing around with the president around the Resolute desk. The change is just mind-boggling.
No, definitely. He looks like he has the Western vote of confidence for now. Ömer, there was a question, why is Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan in Washington? Then all of a sudden he pops up at a trilateral with Trump and al-Sharaa, also Rubio, Witkoff, Barak, Shaibani. And interesting to see the Turkish foreign minister, I mean, one of Erdogan's most trusted bureaucrats, there at the table, not after policy's been written with Turkey reacting to what the United States is doing, but as decisions are being made or as something is being formulated. I mean, we haven't seen that type of preemptive dialogue or dialogue early on in a policy between the Turks and the Americans in probably decades. I mean, the 80s or 90s. And we haven't seen the Americans and the Turks on the same page in Syria since very, very early on in the revolution, the first couple of years. So is this a huge difference, or at least a big step forward in the U.S.-Turkey relationship?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. And definitely, yes, we see a huge change. I mean, it was not only the Assad regime that was toppled, but it was also the bad Turkish-American relations that was toppled at that time. We see that the Turkish and American approach are more and more in sync with each other when it comes to Syria. There are still some major issues that need to be resolved. Northeastern Syria, the integration of the YPG-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces. Definitely, But we see that the Trump administration wants to work with Turkey in Syria and through Turkey in Syria. We have seen this when Trump initially announced his intent to lift sanctions. He by name mentioned the Turkish president and the Saudi crown prince. And now in this meeting, in this historic meeting for Syria, we see an unexpected Turk in the White House. And according to Hakkapidant's public statements, he later on joined the meeting with Trump and Shah as well. And then there was a second round of a trilateral meeting. And this shows us that the United States of America has an interest in the Trump administration in coordinating its policy in Syria with Turkey. And this is something that is of a huge opportunity for the region and for bilateral ties between Turkey and the US, because for years, Syria was the main source of conflict between Turkey and the United States of America. Now it's turning into an area of partnership and cooperation. And here, also, the visit of Ahmed al-Sharaa to the White House by itself is, from a Turkish perspective, an acknowledgement by the United States of America that the Turkish approach is a right one, because Turkey has since day one argued that the Syrian government, new Syrian government, needs to be given a chance, and that the region is fed up with wars and non-state armed actors and the chaos and disorder. So Turkey has been advocating for statehood, for capable, strong governments in the region, and for territorial integrity. So by inviting Sharaa to the White House, the Trump administration has not only signaled towards Turkey, but also to other regional actors, most importantly Israel, that the Trump administration does not intend to see Syria fragment or become weak or destroyed once more, and that the American position is that Syria should be stable, unified, and strong, and that Syria needs to be given a chance to prosper. And this is something very welcomed in Ankara.
Mm-hmm. Now, Rich, I mean, obviously the optics of the meeting looked fantastic, but optics, that's quite meaningless if it's not followed up by policy or implementation, at least. I mean, if you had to make a checklist, at least from an American perspective, of what needs to come next for these optics to be celebrated, or at least the optics to move forward with something meaningful where that relationship can build into an alliance like al-Sharaa said he hopes to have with the United States, what would be the top 2 or 3 items on your checklist?
Well, I'll give you a couple. First and foremost, it's a careful balancing act for Washington to tamp down the concerns which persist, by the way, for the Israelis about what's happening to the north of their border. So one of the first things on the checklist is to facilitate dialogue. It's become clear, I think, that Sharaa doesn't think now is the right time to join the Abraham Accords. That's fine. Some sort of a consultative mechanism between the two will make President Trump's job much, much easier. Second, and this is maybe a little bit more difficult, is the shovels need to start digging dirt. Companies need to start coming in. I will tell you that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce opened earlier this year a Syria program and immediately had, if I remember the numbers correctly, something like 70 companies sign up. There's a huge appetite among American companies, Turkish companies, European companies to get in and to start rebuilding infrastructure, energy, productive capacity industries, that sort of thing. But red tape and lack of institutional capacity in Damascus is a problem. So there needs to be some very assiduous work on the part of the new government to embrace all the components of Syrian society, which they're doing symbolically, but to get people back to work. And then the third thing I would say that needs to happen is just continuing to focus. We have midterms coming up in the U.S. 2026 is going to be a big year, and it's very much the past pattern for Washington to become seized with domestic politics. It's been a remarkable amount of manpower, senior level executive talent put on the Syria portfolio. Tom Barrack really has spent more time on wearing his Syria hat than he has in bilateral relations with Turkey. I think Ankara is pretty much okay with that, given the salience of this issue. But it's hard to maintain for a global superpower like this focus in the way that we have on Syria since the advent of the second Trump term. I think those 3 things will determine. So again, that's economic focus, that's talks with Israel, and that's Washington, D.C.'s ability to focus talent and emphasis on this. Those 3 things will determine the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Jamal, I mean, it looks like al-Sharaa knows how to read a room pretty well. I mean, ever since he's been in power, he hasn't engaged the Israelis kinetically. He's tried to stay away. I mean, over 800 airstrikes on Syrian soil, zero retaliation. While he's in Washington, you know, he's saying he doesn't want to join the Abraham Accords, which from a public opinion perspective and where Syria is at right now, probably wouldn't be the wisest initiative for him. But he's also showing that he's going to be benign regarding Syria, regarding Israel, that he's not any type of threat there. And he understands that in Washington right now, that is the major agenda, is Israel's security. So he's trying to have this type of balance. How do you see Sharaa moving forward, where he's going to balance what the U.S. wants, he's going to balance the domestic public opinion, but also balance the realities of the region, what's happened in the Golan Heights in the past and what's happened since Syria's been liberated, what's Israel's expectations of Syria and the current administration, what his boundaries and parameters are, what he can really do?
So thank you for this very deep question. I hope I can give you a good answer here. I think what Sharaa is doing reflects not only his priorities vis-a-vis the United States and balancing act in the region. We have to remember also that the Syrian relations with Israel have a reflection on Syria's strategic posture vis-a-vis the Kurds in the northeastern region, and that means relations with Turkiye. There's also an obvious Turkish-Israeli tug of competition. I don't want to say tug of war, but there's an active kinetic competition going on, if not on the ground, but there's like a very, very hot kind of to and fro over Gaza, but over Syria for the past few months between Turkey and Israel. So Sharaa is not only doing that in the regional and strategic sense, but he's also reflecting Syrians, everyday Syrians' desire to end the posture that Syria has taken in the past few years. Don't get me wrong, every Syrian that you know that's worth their salt is for a Palestinian state, is for a stop of the war in Gaza as happened, is for some kind of rights acknowledgement of the Palestinians. And they are not very hot on Israel, specifically this type of government that rules in Israel right now with its posturing and its militarized, you know, especially as you said, the number of sorties that happened within the past few months. However, everybody also wants to get back to the rebuilding of their lives. The destruction on the Syrian side is huge. The images don't do it justice. Syrians want to go back and rebuild their country, and they know that this is incompatible with a strategic posture that is standing in front of Israel on behalf of the Palestinians, paying the price, so to speak, for this. So Sharaa has a lot of traction in that sense, going to talk to the Israelis. That's what gave Sheibani, for example, when he visited Azerbaijan back in July, the kind of capacity to over the counter say that, yes, we were talking to the Israelis, that the talks were advancing at the time. This used to be not the case in the past Syrian administration. So this change has also signaled some kind of buy-in from Syrian population that they want this issue to be settled.
It definitely looks like Syria wants to work with both Turkey and the United States, the U.S. and Turkey both interested in working with Syria. It's good to see both the U.S. and Turkey wanting to work together in Syria for a change. Now, Ömer, I want to talk a little about possible spoilers, because, I mean, everything seems to be going pretty good. I mean, whether it's quick or slow, at least it's moving forward. You've been having this narrative lately in the media of Israel and Turkey kind of at loggerheads over Gaza, but there's this perception, or at least this kind of invisible hand trying to move these two countries together kinetically somewhere. And if that's going to happen, I think the flashpoint could be Syria. And also, since 2014, you've had the YPG, a sister affiliate of the PKK terror group, a major national security threat for Turkey, present in Syria. They were partners under the Obama administration with the U.S., but at least the Turkish side, the PKK, they've disbanded, they've disarmed, and it looks like the YPG could be taking steps that are acceptable for Turkish national security? A lot of foot dragging over there. You're smiling. Tell me why you're smiling. How is that going to play out? Should Turkey be concerned? Are these real spoilers, or will the Americans, the Turks, and the Syrians together be able to solve these two issues?
First of all, let me say that I'm quite hopeful for Syria's future in the coming period. But that being said, actually, when we look at Syria, there are three main potential spoilers. And it's Israel, Iran, and YPG-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces. So it's quite interesting to see that Iran and Israel have a shared common interest. They are not in sync with each other, but they have a common interest in weakening the new Syrian government, and the propaganda campaign from pro-Iranian and pro-Israeli boards and social media figures against the Syrian government continues. But here, as we have long talked about the Israeli angle for quite some time, we have to assess that Iran is not in a real capable situation to invest lots of resources in weakening the Syrian government, so they have become a lesser threat. But the YPG-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces, as of now, we have a quite difficult situation. On one side, officially speaking, in terms of their verbal speaking, the SDF is committed to be integrating into the Syrian state. They will become part of the Syrian state. And Mazlum Abdi even says, the general commander of the Syrian Democratic Forces, says that Syria should be one nation, one army, and one people. So this is quite good, actually, in terms of rhetoric. But when it comes to actual what's happening on the ground, we see an opposing situation. We see that the SDF has rejected everything the Damascus side has demanded. So from big items like handing over the Deir ez-Zor governorate to Damascus directly as a first initial trust-building measure, to even small things like releasing the prisoners who were captured by the YPG from the Syrian army as a goodwill gesture. This is not even progressing. Or just a demand by Damascus that the names of the officers inside the Syrian Democratic Forces should be handed over so that Damascus knows who they will integrate into their armed structures. But all of these didn't happen. And when it comes to the PKK, we see that the PKK has taken a decision to disarm and disband, but the disarmament and disbandment hasn't happened yet. So, and we see an attempt from the PKK cadres to make a differentiation between what was stated by Öcalan to disarm and dissolve into something like a negotiated settlement in which the SDF should keep everything in Syria, but the PKK will be disarming in Turkey and in northern Iraq. So like a quid pro quo arrangement. But this is not the approach from Ankara and not the approach from Damascus. Neither was this actually the call from Abdullah Öcalan, but Abdullah Öcalan, when it comes to Syria, he kept it quite ambiguous what he actually means, and he refrained from saying something clear regarding Syria. So the United States of America has been pushing the SDF to integrate, the Turks have been pushing, but when Israel bombed Damascus and targeted the Ministry of Defense and the presidential palace, the Syrian government had to take a decision to withdraw its forces out of Sweda. So Sweda, another topic, but this incident has shown the SDF that Israel can intervene and force Damascus to withdraw if necessarily. And this changed the balance of power. And since then, we haven't seen any progress. So either Syria reads a new security mechanism with Israel, or the United States of America really strongly pushes on the SDF to integrate, or we will need a Turkish military enforcement of the SDF integration, or a Turkish military build-up and pressure to force the SDF into integration, because on the ground, what they are doing is not in line with that. We see that the SDF is building new tunnels, new defensive structures. We see that they have integrated regime remnants into their armored forces and trying to train and reorganize regime remnants, which is not in the spirit of integration into the Syrian state. And last but not least, they have even banned the educational curriculum for schools, which came out of Damascus, and they have prevented Christian schools to teach their students in this curriculum. Later, after huge pressure, they have reversed this decision, but only for Christian schools. So even the curriculum from Damascus is not allowed in northeastern Syria. So how will they be integrated fully into the Syrian state? It's a big question.
Yeah. Guys, this is one of those conversations where I wish this was an hour-long show, but alas, it's 30 minutes and we're out of time. Rich, Jamal, Omar, thanks for a fantastic conversation. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.